Welcome to the channel, everybody. On today's video, we're going to be replacing the rear brakes on this Range Rover L322. Not hard to do on this particular model. This doesn't have the Brembo brakes in the rear. It does in the front. So these are a little bit different than the Brembos. We'll be taking these calipers off, replacing the pads. We will also be taking the caliper brackets off and replacing the rotors on this. And we'll also refresh these calipers with a fresh coat of paint. Off the ground, onto jack stands, obviously with the wheels off. So let's get started. So to remove and replace the pads on this rear, it's fairly simple. You can remove the bracket and the caliper all as one piece, but we will remove them separately. So if somebody's just replacing the pads, you don't need to remove the bracket. That'll help you out that way. But if you are replacing the rotor at the same time, you will have to remove the bracket also. Now to remove the caliper, there are two 14mm bolts. One is here, one is here at the bottom. They can be different depending if you got an aftermarket caliper that may have been replaced at one point. Sometimes those bolts can be different size. So we'll go ahead and get those removed. Sometimes you do need to take a wrench and hold the inner here as you're removing that. So let's get those off. So if you have both of these bolts are removed, so once those are removed and out of the way, you should be able to remove the caliper just like so. And you can set that aside. Usually just on top of the knuckle here is fine. Now your pads, you can access those here. Here's your pad. It's not so bad. And then you have the inner pad on the inside here. You want to get everything cleaned up as far as all your hardware goes. We'll get this stuff cleaned up back on there. So again, if you're just replacing the pads, you want to clean everything up here and put your new pads in, and you can put the caliper back on. Now on this, we are replacing the rotors, so we will need to remove this caliper bracket. You want to remove these slides and make sure you clean these and lube these with some grease and put those back in. Now to remove the bracket, there are bolts back here. There's one down here and one up top here. The bolts holding the bracket in the back are 16mm. So we'll go ahead and remove those. Once those bolts are out, you're able to slide the bracket off just like so. Now that we have the bracket off, we can go ahead and remove the rotor. Now this rotor looks a bit rusted since I've actually washed the truck as it was sitting in here with the wheel off, and it's just water that's dried up on here. Anyhow, to get the rotor off, there is an Allen bolt here that holds the rotor onto the hub. So we'll take our Allen key and remove that. Okay, once you have that bolt off, you can just pull the rotor right off of the hub. Sometimes you may need to hammer them. They tend to get stuck on the parking brake that's inside of the rotor here. So now that we have our rotor off, again, that is a 6mm Allen that holds the rotor on. Now with the rotor off, there is a parking brake set up in here. These are shoes. Now it's a good time to change them. Mine looks like there's still plenty of material left. They're still in good shape, so we'll leave those alone. Again, that's a good time to change them if that's what's needed. Now we'll take a wire wheel and clean off this hub so our rotor has a nice clean surface to seat up against. I was able to take some brake cleaner, wash this whole area. I've taken a drill with the wire brush on it. I was able to clean the hub. I put some anti-seize on it so your new rotor does not seize up onto the hub. That does happen quite a bit. Now if you see that your rotor does not want to go on and is catching on the parking brake shoes, there is an adjuster at the bottom here. As you can see, this star adjuster. Turning it one way or the other moves these shoes in or out. Now if you feel that the rotor is not going on, it's hanging up on those shoes, that can be adjusted to move those in a bit so your new rotor can go on. Now, I don't use the parking brake on this at all, so I've actually just painted the shoes to keep them fresh and clean so they don't rust up. Before we can install new brake pads, you want to take your old brake pad, put it up against the piston on the caliper like this, and with the C-clamp, you want to go ahead and crank that in. You can see with the C-clamp and using the old pad, I was able to seat the piston all the way in. Now we're ready to go ahead and put our rotor bracket and new pads in. We have our new rotor in place. This is the drilled slotted. Now on these, they're what I had on here before, same rotors. On the olders, I had done the hats in black and the edges and the inside to keep them clean. On this new set, I decided not to do black. I did clear these, however, to keep them cleaner. And you can paint those whatever color you like. They do come painted also. You can get them in black and then possibly red and other colors. I stuck with these. These are zinc coated. So again, I did clear them. Now putting it back on, I do have my 6mm Allen back in place. You'll notice there is another hole here on the outer edge. There's no bolt that goes in it. It's just a plastic plug. If you just remove it out of your originals, you can go ahead and put that plug back in here. All that does, in case your rotor seizes onto the parking brake inside, that hole and this hole will help. You can put a screw into that hole to remove it. It's just to pull them. That's all that's there for. But now we're in good shape. I did give the caliper another fresh coat of paint, so we'll wait until that dries up and we'll get all this together. And then we'll just have to repeat the same process on the other side of the vehicle. So our caliper is just about dried out from paint. I have the bracket in position. We will take our 16mm bolts through the back and secure that, and then we will go ahead and take our brake hardware, and that'll fit right into the bracket just like this, and that'll snap right in. So there's one at the bottom and there is also one on top. I have the pads here. I got some slide lube on the contact ends. You just want to take that pad and slip it right into its position and push it in towards your rotor, and that'll lock in. I already have the inner one that goes in the same way. They're both actually exact same pads. You also want to put some grease out here where the caliper contacts the pad on the outer and the inner piston. You can put it on the caliper if you like, or you can put the grease right on the pad here. So at this point we can go ahead and put our caliper slides in. Here's our slides. We'll get these cleaned up, put some fresh lube on them, and we'll put them back in. Here I have the slide cleaned up with some more Siliglide lube, and that'll go right into the caliper here, and the rubber boot will kind of snap in and hold it in. I already have the upper one in here. Now we're ready to go ahead and install the caliper onto the bracket. So the caliper is in position. We got the 14mm bolts here going in through the back. Remember, when you're installing the caliper, these pins can go in and out, so you can push it in by hand if it's hanging up and push the caliper over it to line up the bolt right through that into the slide pin. And same thing at the bottom here. We got both of those in. We'll go ahead and get that tightened up, and there's one more step we got to complete yet. So we have the caliper bolts, the 14mm back here, fully tightened up. Now when you're tightening these, if you feel that it keeps spinning, you can always take a wrench on this inner nut and hold that while you're tightening it. And same thing with the bottom one. Now the last step that we have, right side caliper on these vehicles, the right rear and the left front will have a sensor wire, a wear sensor, going to the inner pad, and that just clips right into that edge of the pad, just like that, and that'll stay right there. So that wear sensor just clips in right into the pad here on the inner pad, and again, that's only on the right side. You won't have one on the other side when you go to do that. So at this point, all we got to do is put the wheel back on. Of course, I got to finish up the other side, repeat this Same process on that side. Of course, when you are doing a job like this, you're doing them kind of both at the same time, going back and forth and completing it. But for the sake of the video, it was easier just to show you on one side, so you can repeat the same process on the other side. So I will go ahead and get the other side done in the same manner. We'll get the wheels on, take this vehicle for a drive, make sure there's no noises, no vibrations, and that is complete. I will leave links to all the parts and helpful tools in the description for you. I thank you for watching.